I just lost at the casino, so lend me just $1,000. This person, who only sees me as an ATM, is my biological mother. Even though we are related by blood, I don't think of her as my parent. I won't be beaten by her. My name is Aileen. I've gotten so used to saying ouch whenever I stand up that I even said it recently just by picking up the TV remote from the desk. There was no way I felt any pain, and my husband even laughed at me. I just said that out of habit. Once, there was a really embarrassing family member, my mother. When I was a child, she always collected the Christmas money I received. As I started elementary school and talked more with friends about the Christmas money, I began to wonder where mine went. Some kids said their parents let them save it or spend it as they wished. And some even got candy instead of money. In my house, Mom just said, "I am keeping it safe for you." I used to believe she was saving it for me. But it was much later that I discovered there was no money saved anywhere. When I joined middle school, I started getting a small allowance. I was saving up diligently, hoping to buy a music player. But one day, the bag of savings I had stashed under my desk vanished without a trace. My mom was always home, so it couldn't have been a thief in just my room. I asked her, "Do you know where the savings under the desk went?" Smiling, she replied, "I'm keeping it for you, as a protection against theft." It made sense. But why wouldn't she hand over the passbook then? Wasn't the allowance meant for me? I felt something was off. "Thanks, Mom. So, from now on, I'd like to put my allowance in the bank myself. Can you teach me how to use the passbook?" "No, you can't. It's become a large amount of money, and you, a child, can't manage it. You've never even been to a bank. Children shouldn't handle money." Her tone was gentle, but as she spoke with wide eyes, I was taken aback. Indeed, I had never been to a bank nor knew how to deposit money. I really was a naive child. Holding on to a large sum was indeed scary, and I thought, Mom must be right. So, I accepted it at the time. But it was just a bunch of dimes I had saved in that vinyl bag. And it wasn't such a large sum to worry about. From then on, whenever my savings grew, she regularly started keeping them without telling me how much was saved. Or showing me the passbook. By the time I was in 8th grade, my friends started saying, "That's weird," and I couldn't ignore the strangeness at home anymore. As I got older, I started wanting money for cute hairpins or acne treatment lotions, thinking that there wouldn't be a problem if I earned the money myself. I started working part-time after entering high school. But after I received my first paycheck, the envelope with my salary disappeared from my bag the following morning. I searched everywhere and asked my parents if they had seen it, but they said no. However, next to my mother, who coolly said, "I haven't seen it," my father's face was strained. He definitely knew something. Considering everything up until then, wasn't my salary stolen by my mother? I debated confronting my father, but fearing he might be in on it too, I couldn't bring myself to ask rashly. It was so frustrating, and since I had no choice but to accept the loss of my first month's salary, I thought of ways to hide the second month's. But honestly, I didn't know how to hide it. I needed my parents' consent to use the passbook. And I had no choice but to bring it home. Leaving it with a friend was worrying as well. Reluctantly, I decided to move my usually living room placed bag to my room. It wasn't a perfect method, but surely even my crafty mother wouldn't sneak into my room while I was asleep and stealthily steal the salary. Since she had kept my allowance while I was away, if I always carried this money with me, surely it would be safe. The naive plan of a child proved how powerless it was against my mother that night. Waking up to a noise, there she was, boldly taking the salary envelope from my room. "What are you doing?" "Mom. It's not good not to contribute to the living expenses." "What? Who do you think raised you to this point? If you've started working, you need to contribute to the house like us." My mind was filled with question marks for a moment. Is that how it's supposed to be? Well, maybe. But I started working because my money was being stolen. But I am being taken care of. Her assertive reasoning made me feel like I was making a big mistake. So, I'll be keeping this. It helps. Wait. All of it? Of course, how much do you think it cost to have you and raise you? This is just a small change. Being told that, as a child, I had nothing to retort. My hard-earned money being called small change as she took it made me resentful. I wanted to blurt out something dramatic like in a school drama. I never asked to be born, but I held back. Sorry. I apologized, for some reason. If you understand, that's good. Good night. My mother smiled back at my apology and left the room. From then on, out of my meager part-time earnings, I started giving money to my parents for living expenses. Yet, my mother began saying things like, "Do you think living expenses alone are enough? You don't even know how much your monthly school fees are." And before I knew it, she had taken most of my salary. "You should know, it's thanks to us that you can go to school and work." Gaining life experience, she often lectured. I wanted to leave home, but I had no savings. As a child, there was nothing I could do, yet I continued to balance school and work, hoping to keep even a little of my part-time money. It was a job I started to buy things I wanted. But I could hardly afford what I desired, let alone save any money. After graduating from high school, I wanted to go to college. But according to my mother's outrageous belief, we don't have that kind of money. And it's easier for girls to get married if they're not too educated. So absolutely no further studies for you. My only choice was to find a job. I thought of escaping to a company with employee dorms. But after failing job interviews, I ended up commuting from home. However, once I could create a bank account, I was able to save, and at 22, I was supposed to be free until my father passed away. My father died suddenly from a heart attack while at work. At his funeral, while looking at my father's portrait, my mother murmured, "Lucky, I can live off the survivor's pension until I start receiving his pension." As greedy as she is, I wanted to believe she wouldn't say such a thing. But I couldn't overlook the smirk on her face. A bit later, having finally moved out on my own, my mother started visiting frequently. She didn't even pretend to have other reasons, it was clearly just to ask for money. Apparently, while my father and I were out during the day, she was spending her time at the casinos. My Christmas money, savings, and part-time earnings all vanished into the slot machines. My father had noticed when I was in middle school and was furious. But there was no way she would listen to him. She didn't quit slots, didn't stop siphoning money from me. And her bad habits only worsened. After my father passed, she could go to casinos from morning till night. And soon got hooked on another gambling through her casino friends. She had completely sunk into the gambling mire. "This month I lost badly. Can you share some money?" she would ask unabashedly and with a carefree smile. No matter how late I worked overtime, she would wait in front of my house, not letting me go to my room until I gave her money. It was too persistent, and unfortunately, after giving her small amounts a few times, I was out of luck. Which was better, living at home or not? Would it be like this forever? On a day overwhelmed by despair, a postcard about an unfamiliar debt collection arrived at my house. Upon inquiry, it turned out that a consumer finance company I had never heard of claimed I had borrowed money. The man on the phone was calm, yet his tone was not kind and included a hint of anger. I immediately knew it was a terrible company, and my body trembled. Later, when I confronted my mother at my parents' house, it was revealed that she had borrowed about $20,000 in my name from 3 companies. "I'm sorry, but look. You can borrow from elsewhere to pay it back. Are you out of your mind? That's just going to lead to debt hell. Really, stay out of my life forever." Irritated by my mother's carefree words, I declared my disownment and left my parents' house. At the time, the internet wasn't available. And a person who doesn't borrow money wouldn't know about debt. Not knowing where to seek advice, the idea of consulting a lawyer popped into my head. But I was reluctant to spend the money. Thus, I resigned myself to the fact that if I borrowed money from a shady company, I had to repay it. In hindsight, there might have been a better way since I wasn't the one who borrowed it. But knowing my mother had no ability to repay, I panicked over the debt in my name, frightened by the collection calls, and paid the $20,000. It was money I had finally managed to save in my bank account. That money was supposed to free my future self. This incident prompted me to quit my job and escape my mother by working in a hotel in a state far from my hometown. I thought my financially strapped mother wouldn't follow me this far, which was a correct decision. Finally, I could restart my life in a new place. Eventually, a guest at the hotel fell in love with me at first sight. And he became my husband, Tony. Despite being blacklisted due to the incident with my mother, he didn't mind and took me as his wife. After getting married, we had to live with his parents because I couldn't get a loan. But his parents were very kind. "You're not responsible for your debts, so be proud," they told me. My in-laws were the first to clearly say, "It's great that you cleaned up after your parents' mess." It felt incredibly relieving. Eventually, our daughter Mia was born. I was removed from the blacklist. And we bought our long-desired home. "Mia's grown up, shall we go on a trip?" my travel-loving husband suggested one day. The proposal thrilled my daughter. It was my second trip in life since our honeymoon, and I was overjoyed. Unbecomingly for my age, I went shopping for new clothes for the trip with my husband. Excited like a child even before the trip. Then came the day. We were enjoying our first family stroll through the streets of New York when it happened. "Isn't that Aileen?" "Aileen, right?" A voice shouted loudly, waving hands frantically and rushing towards us. It was my mother, dressed in dirty sweatpants. Somewhat aged and thinned perhaps by aging, her eyes were sunken, looking like just skin and bones. In an instant, I didn't know how to breathe, feeling my fingertips growing cold. Why was she here? "Indeed, it's Aileen. Good to see you're doing well. Oh, and who's this man beside you?" "Your boyfriend, huh?" I wanted to disappear from embarrassment. To have such a terrible parent seen by my husband and daughter. "Who is this child?" asked a man in sweatpants, similar to my mother. She laughed loudly. "She is my daughter. Isn't she beautiful, just like me?" "Aileen, this is my boyfriend. We've been living together for a long time. So he's kind of like your father." She chuckled, not minding that I was looking down, avoiding eye contact. "Anyway, if you live nearby, you should at least introduce your spouse to your parents. Really, you have no manners." At this point, facing a mother pretending to be good, I felt so angry I trembled. But I was too choked up to retort, which was incredibly frustrating. "Right, I just lost at the casino, so lend me just $1,000. I was taken aback. She was still trying to steal money. Just then, as her boyfriend laughed frivolously and grabbed my shoulder, saying, "Help me, Aileen," my husband, in a low voice, twisted the hand of my mother's boyfriend who was touching me and said, "Don't touch my wife." The boyfriend provocatively said to my husband, "Jealousy is ugly, isn't it?" But my husband was unfazed. Instead, he twisted the hand even harder. And the boyfriend screamed in pain and moved away from me. Next, irritated that her boyfriend was hurt, my mother provocatively said to my husband while putting her arm around me, "It's okay for me to do this, right? I'm the parent, and you are just an outsider. Is that so? Then how about you send some dowry for your daughter now? Maybe about $10,000? What? My wife didn't tell you about her marriage, cutting off contact with you. Because she doesn't think of you as her mother. It doesn't matter what she thinks or doesn't think. We are connected by blood. Do you understand the agony a child must feel to want to sever ties with their own blood-related parent? Of course not. I've never once thought of cutting ties with my daughter. Someone who doesn't understand even a little bit of their daughter's troubles and pains, like you, is far less understanding than a stranger like me who empathizes with her pain." After saying this, my husband, who had looked so cool, seemed a bit unsure as he glanced at me as if asking, "Right?" Relieved by his usual self, I naturally smiled and nodded, finally feeling like I could speak. "Shut up. If you live in a tourist area, you must have money. Hurry up and give me $1,000. As my mother tried to grab me, her boyfriend stopped her, saying, "Enough already. People are watching." She shrugged off his restraint and tried to grab my collar. But my husband moved behind her and restrained her arms behind her back. "Let go." I'm telling you, I'm her parent, she screamed. And my husband's grip tightened each time. People around started to look at her with disapproval. Everything my husband said is true. I dislike and can't forgive you the most in this world. At my words, my mother stared at me with wide eyes. You shouldn't say such things. I do think so. Being disliked by you doesn't hurt or itch me at all. I wish you would dislike me even more and not interact with me. That's my wish. It was perhaps the first time I had spoken my true feelings to my mother. Initially angry, her face gradually contorted and eventually, she began to cry. How can you say that to me, such an old woman like me? I'll curse you. Be prepared. Don't suddenly play the victim after you've always been so strong-willed. Never come near me or my family again. As I angrily confronted my mother, who seemed to attack me like I was the villain. The surroundings began to murmur, and her boyfriend tried to calm her, saying, "Hey, stop it." But my mother shook her head. I admit I was wrong for trying to borrow money. I did wrong. I ran to gambling because I was lonely. Liar. You've been playing slots since I was little. What are you lonely about? You chose a lonely life by betraying your child. She probably tried to get forgiveness by crying. Silenced by my valid argument, my mother weakly muttered. It's true I want money, but I also truly want to make things right with you now. I have no family left. For the first time, I heard my mother's true feelings. Officer, over here. Unbeknownst to me, my daughter, thinking I might suffer badly at the hands of my mother and her boyfriend, had brought over a patrolling police officer. What? The police? Hey, I'm not involved. Shocked at the sight of the police officer, my mother's boyfriend left her and walked away. My mother hurried after him shouting, "Wait," but he showed no signs of waiting for her. Afterwards, the police officer, having heard the story and realizing it was a family dispute, didn't escalate it and left saying, "Enjoy your trip." According to my daughter, she thought I would be harmed by my mother or her boyfriend. If the police hadn't come, the situation might not have been resolved. I'm grateful to my kind child. Despite the interruption, the rest of the trip was enjoyable. And I returned home very satisfied with the souvenirs I bought for my in-laws. A month later, it seemed my mother had tracked down where I lived, and a letter arrived. I felt anxious, thinking she might be asking for money again. But it was a heartfelt apology letter. Apparently, on the day she spoke to her boyfriend about breaking up, he stole what little money she had and ran away. She decided to change her life after reflecting on what I said that day. Being with that man would lead her back to gambling, so she cut ties with him. But in the end, she was severely betrayed and truly became alone, which deepened her reflection. Despite being a hopeless person, if she genuinely reforms, our parent-child relationship might change. At the bottom of the letter, it read, I've started consulting a fortune teller recently. They said my life's troubles are due to bad influences from my past lives. But a good master gave me a protective scroll for just $10,000. If a scroll can change my life for that amount, it's cheap. I even won $3 in the lottery following the master's advice. This master is definitely the real deal. I might even become a billionaire with a money luck master they'll introduce me to. Oh, even if you become poor in the future, you can't rely on your mother since you're a grown-up now. Take care. It seems my mother had given up on this life to counter the supposed calamities of her past lives. Her feelings of reflection towards me were genuine. So she likely won't ask me for money again. But her habit of depending on something probably won't change. To think she'd spend her meager pension on a scroll. Keeping distance from her still seems best, so I didn't respond to the letter. For the next 5 years until I was informed of my mother's death by the authorities, I never saw her face again. Contrary to the difficult adolescence, my married life has been very enjoyable. My daughter excels at piano, winning numerous competitions and studying abroad. She now tours as a pianist. Her salary is decent, and while not envied by others, she is very happy doing what she loves. My husband retired last year, and we are now spending our days leisurely. I often walked alone in the neighborhood even when I was a housewife. But now my husband is by my side. The familiar scenery feels fresh when I view it with him. My father-in-law passed away about 5 years ago, but my mother-in-law, despite being wheelchair-bound, seems to grow younger each year. Recently getting hooked on cola. Even I find that soda too harsh. She's a lively 88-year-old who can still devour steaks. And I secretly wish she lives long enough to make it into the Guinness World Records. I may not have gotten along well with my biological parents, but my in-laws have become like my real parents. My daughter has achieved her dreams, and I have a kind husband by my side. Thanks to the people I met by fate, I have been able to lead a wonderful life.